PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds is a game in which you attempt to survive out of 100 players until the last person alive. You can play either solo, duo, or in a squad of up to 4 people. Each game begins with you spawning in an airplane that flies over a randomly chosen path across the map. You choose when to jump and then parachute out to whatever location you want to, in a desperate search for finding weapons, ammo, gear, and other things that will allow you to survive. It's basically the Hunger Games if it was an actual game. As the game progresses, there's a white circle that will gradually get smaller. Staying outside of that circle will kill you slowly over time, so you basically are forced into a more and more constricted area over time, so that eventually you either will be killed or kill someone else. It's a really interesting and frantic experience as you desperately search for things like medkits, scopes, helmets, and vests. However, at the same time, it can really oftentimes feel like the game is a bit too RNG heavy. If you don't find the right scopes, or maybe you don't find the right gear, like a level 3 vest or level 3 helmet or something like that, you can get absolutely just blown away by somebody who has a better gun, better armor than you, better medkits and supplies. And God help you if you can't find a good scope, because you're just going to get blown away by so far away you won't even see the guy. There's 2 maps in PUBG. You got one that feels kind of like Eastern Europe. There's wooded areas with a lot of green grass. And then there's another one that's more like Texas, Mexico, sort of deserty feel. The grass one is pretty good, and I do think it's fairly well designed for the most part. But the desert one is just awful. There's tons of areas that are smashed in the corners of the map that you'll never find and never get to because the circle starts so close in or the plane never flies over it. It's just pointless. It's like, why do they even bother to add some of these locations you'll never be able to go to because they're too far off from the plane? I do like the feel, though, of the different maps. The desert one is a lot more open-ended, which means that long-range combat is a lot more prevalent than the grassland one, where you can hide behind things like trees and buildings that are much more prevalent. The gunplay is fairly satisfying for the most part. You've got a ton of different weapons like AKs, M4s, shotguns, Uzis, and pistols, though the balance just isn't that great. There's a lot of guns which are just straight up trash compared to their competitors. Like the AK, for example, is a much worse version than the M4. And as a result, this kind of furthers the idea that this game feels very, very, very RNG heavy, where if you just don't get the right gun, you can get blasted away. Of course, this isn't to say that there isn't skill in the game. There's definitely a lot of skill, and if you're a good shot and stuff like that, you could just blow other people away. You also get the option to play in either first or third person mode. Third person can sometimes feel a bit cheap though, because you get a massive camera that you can just swing around a rock or a tree that you're hiding behind without exposing yourself and get complete 360-degree coverage. So the first person mode is definitely the mode you want to pick up if you're looking for more skill-oriented gameplay. It's just a lot harder for people to just sit behind a rock and camp when they can't see without exposing themselves. It really feels a lot more tactical and strategic. You really have to think, and as a result, people play a lot more cautiously. Graphically, the game is okay, but it works for what it is. It's just very, very bland looking. It looks very copy-paste, like they just took buildings and objects and just copy-pasted them here, there. It's just not very engaging or eye-popping at all. Sound-wise, I really like the game's gunshots in particular. It's very iconic to each gun, which means that you can differentiate what you're fighting against. The game does a great job projecting distance in gunshots. You can hear footsteps of people moving around, which very much incentivizes you to try and be as quiet and as tactical as possible. Performance is definitely hands down the worst part of PUBG. This game crashes all the time. Fortunately, you can reconnect from a crash game. However, if your character was running, he just keeps running. So you'll be out in the open field getting blasted to death before you even reconnect. Or maybe you're just standing there, so somebody will kill you as you're waiting. It's really ridiculous that a launch game has this many problems. It's just stupid. And then on top of that, you have a game that runs like complete shit. The frame drops are all over the place. The game lags all the time. You can shoot people and they take no damage because the game just doesn't recognize the hits. And then the game has a ton of glitches. You'll play and vehicles will just randomly explode or fly around the place from the slightest bump. Your parachute will stop working and get stuck. Doors won't open. Guns will not shoot. The game is just a complete mess in a lot of ways. And then you have hacking and cheating, which is fairly prevalent in PUBG. You're bound to run into someone either abusing a glitch to get into terrain to blast you, or hacking to insta-lock you with an aimbot. Now overall, I really like PUBG. I think it's a lot of fun, especially if you're playing with friends. You can coordinate in duos, trios, or quads to try and survive. It really excels when it comes to that tense gun gameplay as you're trying to coordinate with a friend. Where is an enemy? What are they doing? What kind of guns do they have? How are we going to try and get into their building to kill them? It's really great in that regard. And it's oh so satisfying when you get that winner chicken dinner and you win the game out of 100 people, you by yourself or with friends, surviving to the end and beating the odds. However, despite how much I love this game and find it so much fun, there's so many things that just drag this game down. The performance is terrible, as I mentioned. It crashes all the time. It's glitchy. There's hackers. And worst of all, the RNG. Land in an area with tons of people and can't find a good gun? Welp, you're dead. Can't find a good 4 or 8 times scope? Well, you're dead. As a result, it can oftentimes feel like the game comes more down to RNG than skill. But despite all the problems, I do think PUBG is a really fun game, and it's one of the best games in its class, and it's really taken the genre of Battle Royale games to a new height. So PUBG gets a 7 out of 10. It's a fun game, and I do think it was really good, and I would highly recommend it if you have friends to play with, especially. It's not as fun if you have to join random games, because you just might not get people who communicate, but it is a lot of fun with friends if you can communicate, work together, and try and defeat the enemies. Or maybe if you just enjoy playing by yourself and trying to survive.